Hello and welcome to 2023. Today I'm just doing a quick fill-in video because I've been away since Christmas. I had this footage left over from a couple of weeks ago. It was recorded via the Vision switcher and I've decided to delete the sound because it sounds like there's an aircraft taking off in the background. Even though I had the switcher well out of eye shot. Okay, let's get into it. This is a National Panasonic R100, made from about 1966 to about 73 or something quite late. It's an excellent radio. We had one, my father bought one coming out on the ship from England in 1968 or 67. It was sort of, we came out via South Africa because the Suez was closed and all that sort of thing. So around about 67, 68. We left England in 67 and arrived in Melbourne in 68 is what I'm trying to say. And this particular version of it, or this particular model, has the transformer built into it. Ours didn't, so it always ran on batteries. My father tried to fix it one day and all the tracks lifted off of the PCB board. So when I do this PCB board in a few months, I'll have to be particularly careful. The radio was making a horrible, nasty hum noise. You could still hear it, but it was very 50 hertz noise. And the tuning was a bit odd on it. You could tune it forever and not getting anywhere on the dial, turn it back and lo and behold, it would tune in the station. And I've discovered there's a couple of things wrong with the tuning shaft. So I'll show you those, and I'll also show you the capacitor change on the power transformer. Okay, let's get into it. So this is the radio itself. As you can see, when I turn the tuning knob, it is quite loose. So that's the first thing to be fixed. If I can get the radio out of the chassis, out of the case. It does tune, or did tune somewhat, but it had slipping problems. And as you will see a bit later on, I overcame that. I worked out what it was. And it wasn't quite, well, maybe it was the obvious thing, but the turret itself was actually quite loose. Now, it took me ages to work out how to open this up and get it out of the case. Sorry about the focus. It was playing up something shocking. This is the back view. So the circuit board is actually quite small. And then we have the tuning oscillators and the volume pot, the bass control, and the treble. It seems to want to focus on the closest thing, whether it's taking up the frame or not. It's really annoying. And then it suddenly snaps in, yeah. So it has two speakers in it. One's an 8cm, I think, and one's a 10 or something like that. So when it's working properly, it sounds very good. And working out where the screws to the chassis are. I remember trying to take apart the family one when I was quite young, maybe a teenager or something like that, and I couldn't work out how to take it apart for the life of me. So that radio was safe from me, at least. I could get the back loose, but I couldn't get the back off. And it's actually quite a complicated procedure to get this apart, even to this stage. So that's the band switch off, or the knob off, and you get a better view in there. So the screws are really quite far down, and they're not, well, some of them are, but but a lot of them needed the tweezers to actually get the screws out. And they're coloured red, fortunately. Now, I've since tried to put it back, well, I have put it back together again, but I can't work out where some of the screws go, so I'll have to look on the other radios. I'm pretty sure it's very similar to the R100, which I haven't touched. So there's another one hidden down in there. Will it come out? This is a $64 question. Well, it sort of does, but there's still something stopping it. And it's the aerial connections. So I have a little bit of a look down there. And also the dial pointer is actually glued to the string, which is quite annoying. And I'm yet to put that back in again. At the moment, I'm just testing the radio, so I don't want to fully assemble it. So it took me quite some time to work out how to unhook it. And why it's focusing on about 5% of the frame, I have no idea. Okay, so here we go, we're pulling it out. At long last. So this is the aerial, or that strange loop antenna, that bar that goes right around the radio there. So that was actually very loose. I'm not quite sure how it became so loose. Someone must have been sort of trying to force it at the very end of the dial, because there was something else that indicated that as well. So you can see how loose it is. It wasn't just slightly loose, it was very loose. It's probably a full turn. Finally tight. Did that fix the tuning problem? No, not really. You can see the lump of glue which holds the pointer in place. Just disappearing behind my hand now. You can also see the transformer, which I work on a bit later. It was still slightly loose, so I really tightened it up this time. It's very hard to grab onto something. It is actually the dial lights. They're encased in cardboard of all things. Now I thought at this stage I had fixed it, but it wasn't to be. Just put a couple of screws in temporarily. And you'll notice I twist it backwards. That is so that it drops into the thread on the radio. This doesn't have inserts. It's just screwed straight into the plastic. If you just go willy-nilly and screw it straight in, you can end up putting multiple threads into the plastic, and then of course it'll fail. Okay, let's test the mechanism. If you can hear rattling in the background, it's the flyer screen on the window. It's pretty windy today. That actually feels much, much better. Though the knob kept on coming off, so I needed to push it in properly. Still not in properly. But it's okay temporarily. Unfortunately, it's still slipping. Okay. So the next thing I tried was to lubricate. So I thought it might be something, stiff there, and just turning the dial. Also took the opportunity to lubricate the shafts on the treble and bass and volume controls. Cleaning off the excess, so as not to get it on the string. So that can be a big problem too. If you get oil on the string itself, it can just slip. Just doing the idler wheels or the pulleys. That's the main large one, and there's a couple of others. Just put one or two little tiny drops on. And those needle bottles are excellent for doing that. Which can be really specific. Oops, far too much on that one. Treble, bass and volume. Working the oil into the shafts. Also lubricated the switch. And the pointer mechanism. Watching this, it's really odd, the focus on this camera. Just seems to focus on random things. Just doing the bearings on the tuning capacitor and the running shaft on. Now, a word of warning, this is fader in the green spray can. So this is designed for actual faders, so it lubricates as well. If you use the one in the red can, which I do sometimes, it takes all the lubrication off of the carbon track. And WD-40 is just basically oil, and that can lead to gunking up and horrible things like that. But you'll notice sometimes I use contact cleaner. If the pot is really badly filled with muck or anything like that, I'll use that. Initially clean it out and then use the fader spray. Looks like I got a bit on the bottom of the cabinet there. So you can see that's just the lubricant in it. Now I had to take the chassis out again to actually get to the volume pot and the on-off switch, of course. It's important to work it in as well. If you just spray it, it'll just drip out and not coat the actual tracks properly. You need to actually work it in, and then the action of working it in will remove the dirt. Then of course it'll dry with a nice film on it. As you can see, I'm turning the tuning knob, but the capacitor isn't necessarily moving. So while I'd fixed it partially, it wasn't fully fixed. Now a fully working one will actually have quite a bit of resistance at each end of the dial, whereas this one had absolutely no resistance. So I was just wondering whether the dial cord was fouled up or something like that. At least now if I moved it slightly, it would actually move the capacitor backwards and forwards, but any longer movement and it just would slip. Must have had the radio on at this stage. And I finally worked it out. It was a very loose screw. As you can see, I can actually turn one of them maybe half a turn. And that is already much, much better. And the other one was about a quarter of a turn loose. So that one is obviously quite loose as well. I should have cleaned the dial lights, shouldn't I? Well, it has to come out the cabinet again. Anyway, so just really tightening it up, yep. Then I've actually put some Loctite on it. And I don't know why the camera didn't focus on the bottle there, because it was sitting right on top of the center of the wheel. So just squirt a little bit in. Only takes a tiny amount of it. And I've obviously put a bit too much on. But that's all right. Now it tunes perfectly. Onto the power supply. So I couldn't really film it because it was in a little box. So this is it partially disassembled. So there's a transformer, 2 capacitors of 1,000, I think they were, and a bridge rectifier in there. And of course everything in this radio is made by Matsushita. So that big black block there is the rectifier. And it was actually pretty tricky to put the new capacitors in. Wasn't much room. So there's one in. And putting that back in its screw point. So there's a voltage selector in the middle as well. And there's also a battery AC switch on it. So it's a fairly complicated little piece of electronic gear there.
Wicket's going to turn. All the lead up in the papers has been the wicket's dry. Andrew McDonald said this morning, fairly dry.
Now Rabada bowls and it's pulled away.
It was when they had different people come onto the stand, including Mr. Costello.
Very orderly system. It wasn't run by gangsters. Occupational health and safety was highly versant.
Between the Trump...
Short.
Being able to make a tattoo stay inside skin.
Later, part of a policy discussion paper.
It's just slightly offline. Yes, that was a little bit of commentary from Neil Manthorpe at the primary...
Along with millions of...
The old money effectively out of the home. It gets paid to you fortnightly, or even now they've got the opportunity for a lump sum, and then you can fix up the things you need in your home to make it more...
Aside from all, Ian, aside from all that, and I get that, we've got, okay, you've given us a pretty good...
Body fast bowling. You know, I wish we had that without batting.
Is it?
Dodgy crayfish or something, did you?
No, I didn't. I don't know what I ate, but it must have been something I ate on the day, and yeah, I come down with a bit of food poisoning.
Λοιπόν, 4 του Γενάρη προχωράμε, πλησιάζουμε και προς τα φώτα. Για το φίλο κρατή ο οποίος με πήρε τηλέφωνο, ο
αγιασμός των υδάτων στο Port Melbourne, ο καθιερωμένος, θα γίνει την Κυριακή στις 1 το μεσημέρι. 8 λοιπόν του μηνός θα γίνει ο αγιασμός των υδάτων στο Port Melbourne, θα προηγηθεί βέβαια